Hey everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus coming at you with the top decks in the modern format post banning of Violent Outburst in late March 2023. Now we usually do these videos a little bit earlier in the month, but with the impending banning of a card in Modern, as they indicated, I did hold off on doing this and then kind of waited a weekend or two to kind of start getting some results of what the format started looking like. We will have two honorable mentions I just want to mention as decks that one's on the rise and one's already kind of been reconfigured post-banning. The first one up is Creativity. Now, Creativity is a deck that has been quietly putting up results again, nowhere near the effect of when it was the de facto best deck in the format. However, it has started to do pretty reasonably well again. Not putting up a lot of top finishes, but still a deck you should be aware of. And honestly, nothing's really changed too terribly much. It's still the 5-color mana base. There are two versions of it running around. There's this 5-color version, basically playing all the good stuff. And then you have the 3-color version, which is usually Grixis, that you usually have. Grixis or Jund has some type of Bitter Reunion persist package. The advantages of the Persist package, you have a little bit of a better chance of comboing early on. The advantages of the 5-color version, you get to play a pretty decent kind of Jeskai control-ish game until you find your Indomitable Creativity. You're a Run-in 6 Teferi deck, nothing surprising there. You're a Fable of the Mirror Breaker deck, you're a Leyline Binding deck, you're a Bolt Spell Pierce Reprieve deck, so you get to play, kind of a pseudo facsimile of Jeskai control, and then you get to have this kind of combo-ish finish. A deck that has been reasonably well positioned, but kind of held down a little bit by some of the more instant speed nonsense. It's one of the more fair quasi-combo decks in the format. Has a pretty decent sideboard playing against a lot of different things, but overall, this is a deck that is a little bit on the uptick, and a deck you should certainly be aware of in Modern. Deck number 2 that is an honorable mention, and this is a deck that just literally took a ban, and that is Living End. Now, Living End obviously is a deck that is severely punished for not being able to play at instant speed. And when I was looking at this list at first, I was like, okay, there's only one set of Cascaders in the deck, and that is Charless Agent. Menino Ne, who is probably one of the more active content creators for Living End, found this card that I honestly didn't even know existed. Press the Enemy. Return target spell or non-land permanent opponent controls to its owner's hand. You may cast an instant or sorcery with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. Now, the downside of this card is you actually have to draw your Living End for this to be relevant. But it does allow you to bounce any spell, any permanent to your opponent's hand, and more importantly, it does give you potentially access to instant speed Living Ends again, and you still get to play your Force of Negation, Subtlety, Grief, plus you still have your 4 standard Cascade things. The downside is the deck's a little bit slower, but, doesn't have to play a whole lot of lands with the 8 land cyclers. It now gets to be a true Sultai deck rather than, playing red and your Grief's not really being castable. So, between that, a little bit of access to the Surveillance, I think the deck overall, while it is a little bit weaker without having Violent Outburst, it does get to play a little bit better in mana base, and then, kind of gets to have fun with what it's doing. Don't know how good it is. I know Menino Ne has been putting up some results with the deck, so can't be terrible, but it is another deck to watch as people kind of reconfigure these various Cascade decks. The deck that I would say is number 5 is Tron. Now, Tron's in a weird position. I don't know how good it actually is against the current meta. I know it probably doesn't care much about Yawgmoth. Zoo it can kind of go head-to-head with a little bit. A lot of the format right now is the Scion Leyline package, just shoving Scion and Leyline whatever deck, whether that be Zoo, whether that be some people try shoving it in Yawgmoth, some people try shoving it in Garroyos. So whatever decks can just effectively ignore whatever that's doing. Tron is certainly one of those decks. it does have the pick your poison in it and in the sideboard to help in those matchups to slow the opponent down. That's probably one of the best positioned hate cards in the format currently. But other than that, it's kind of the Tron we've all kind of gone to know and love. For the One Ring, for Karn the Great Creator, it's not really a Karn Liberated deck anymore. And then, various threats, Sunrise Titan, blow up lands, all is dust to deal with all your opponent's creatures in addition to Oblivion Stones. Tron's in a weird place, but it has been putting up quite a bit of result, so it is number 5 this month. Number 4, a deck that just continues to chug along. A lot of people figured would be one of the better decks in the format. Didn't really lose anything, obviously, is Amulet Titan. Now, for whatever reason, Amulet Titan hasn't been putting up as great of results lately, which is, I find kind of weird because this is a deck that basically encapsulates ignoring what the Domain Zoo decks are doing, other than the fact that the main Zoo decks, do have a fast clock, they do have Leyline Binding, they do have reasonable disruption. But this is a deck that performs reasonably well, especially in a format where Rhinos and Murktide are not performing the best right now. But this is a deck that's not putting up at least the numbers that I would have expected it to after the post bans, but still pretty reasonable deck overall. Obviously has the explosive Titan turns, etc., and remains one of the top decks in the format. Now, number 3, this is kind of the joke version of Yawgmoth that Young Dingo was playing in the challenge. 4 Leyline, 4 Scion, just shove that in every deck is kind of the ongoing joke right now. Other than that, you are just the normal Yawgmoth deck, obviously a little bit stretched, a little bit more thin without all of your bullet targets, so you don't have things like Orcish Bowmasters in your deck, you don't have as many copies of, say, Strangleroot Geist, you don't even run as many copies of Yawgmoth, so the deck is probably a little bit worse than the normal version of it, plus you're playing a little bit more of a stretched mana base. But that said, regular Yawgmoth, very powerful deck, one of the top performing decks in the format, obviously a deck that was not hit by any of the bannings, and a deck most people probably expected to be number 1 in the format right now, but for right now is just not quite putting up the results of the top 2 decks. Number 2, a deck that's been on the rise for quite some time, that is Garroyle's Vengeance mid-range. Sometimes you'll see 3, sometimes 4 colors, some of them are trying to shove the Scion Leyline package in here, but basically your Grief Solitude deck with Ephemerates and then copies of Gristlebrand and Atraxa to bring back with your copies of Garroyle's Vengeance. Some copies are running Falala Archaeologist, others are running the 3 mana draw 2, discard 1, or discard 2 unless you discard an instant or sorcery card that some people have been toying around with. Basically, it's kind of pick your poison, pick what your anti-hate cards are. Some versions are running Prismatic Endings, some versions are running Leyline Binding. But basically, you're this reasonable mid-range deck with the broken grief starts, and then the ability to, say, turn 3, turn 4, Atraxa, Blanket with Ephemerate, and kind of take over with overwhelming card advantage and big fatty boom booms. And that is the number 2 deck in the format currently. Number 1 deck in the format is actually a quasi-aggro deck, and that is Domain Zoo. So I call it a quasi-aggro deck because it does still have the 1-2 synergy of Leyline the Guild Pack, Sign of Draco, making it, kind of a combo deck, but you're still, Ragavan, Wild Nacatl, Territorial Kavu, Nashoba Brawler, Scion, then Tribal Flames, Bolt, Stubborn Denial, Leyline Binding. The core of the deck hasn't really changed much other than slotting in Leyline, the Guild Pact, and some of the other tertiary threats, while improving your mana, at least while Leyline's in play. You have a myriad of different sideboard options because you play all the colors, basically. The trick with this deck is building the mana base, fetching with the mana base, and learning to play the games without Leyline and the Guild Pact. Even before Leyline, this was one of the more reasonable, aggressive decks in the format. Probably has supplanted Burn as the best true aggro deck in the format, just because it has bigger butts, they cannot lie, and they have bigger burn spells, and still has decent mana efficiency. So this is the top deck in the currently performing in the modern format here in late March 2024. Domain Zoo, what a crazy world we live in with modern right now. The format has been shaken up. Whether it's been for the better or not remains to be seen, but we really only have 2 or 3 months to kind of enjoy it before Modern Horizons 3 just comes in and breaks things again. So anyways, if you like modern content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Hope to see you for our next video.